Chapter. And the talk title today is The Paradigm of Possibilities. And when you think about it, or when I think about it, or reflect on what a paradigm is, a paradigm is really simply a way of seeing and a way of being. Or another way to say it is our normal way of doing something, right? So we have so many different paradigms in the world today. And if you're someone like me, I think maybe a year and a half ago or so, if you would have made predictions of what was coming in the world, I'll just put it this way. If you predicted everything that was going to happen in our world, please let me know, because I will hire you to be my psychic, because you must obviously be in touch with something that most of us had no idea was coming. And the reason I say that is when we connect with our true essence, when we recognize the truth of who and what we are, the ultimate truth of who and what we are, which is that divine spark, then what's happening in the world has less power over us. And it doesn't mean that what's happening in the world isn't happening in the world. What it means is that we have a divine opportunity and a divine possibility for living in the frequency or a deep knowing of the ultimate truth of who and what we are. And therefore, we can be a difference maker in the world rather than being bounced around by the conditions of life. And boy, if there's ever been an opportunity for us to look at how we can be the love in the world that is being yearned for in so many different ways, it's this time in human history. And so a paradigm, if it is true that a paradigm is simply a way of being or seeing, then we can look at the different paradigms of collective consciousness, right? I love what our wonderful friend, Reverend Dr. Michael Barnard Beckwith, says about paradigm. He says, we're not here to save the world. We're here to serve the new paradigm. So what does that mean? What is this paradigm we're here to serve? We're here to serve the paradigm of the essential teachings that we just so beautifully read together. And that is unity's basic principle that there is only one power and one presence active in the world. And if it's true that there's one power and one presence, and if it's also true that each of us is a perfect expression of that power, that's a very different paradigm than what we might be hearing on the news, or what we might be seeing on social media, or maybe what our family members are telling us, or maybe even possibly the narrative in our minds, or the thoughts that we have about what's happening in the world, what's happening in our life. And there was a moment in my evolution when I realized, and this is true for me, it might not be true for you, but I had spent a good 20 years trying to change the narrative, or change my thinking, or change my point of view, or change my perspective. And something happened for me. And that was, I realized, oh my gosh, asking the mind to stop thinking is like asking the lungs to stop breathing, or the heart to stop pumping blood. Now, I didn't say that. I heard someone say that. And I started to become curious about that. What if the goal isn't to change my thinking, or to get my mind to believe certain things or not believe others, or change the narrative of my life? What if it were something much simpler? And that is, there is a reality beyond thought. There is a reality beyond my point of view. In other words, what if I'm more than my opinions? And what if the intention isn't to learn how to change my mind, but to witness my mind from this place of essential beingness? To really live that first principle, there is only one power and one presence active in my life and in the world. Because it sounds really great, right? When I came to Unity in 1988 and I heard that, I thought, wow, that's really profound. I really also thought, well, that's a really lovely idea. And that there's one power, that there's not good and evil, that there's nothing wrong here, that everything is a perfect expression of source energy. But to actually embody that took me a little bit of spiritual practice, I would say at least 20 years, to understand that I have opinions, but I'm not my opinions. And as I allowed myself to tap into my essential beingness, I did tap into a paradigm of possibilities rather than the finite structures that were created in my mind. In other words, as much as I tried to change my mind still had some kind of limitation. What is that limitation? For example, let's say we're working on financial prosperity. And if you're anything like me, you grew up thinking that there wasn't enough. That was a message I got a lot. There's not enough. We can't afford that. There's not enough for everyone. And so I had that very deeply ingrained in my thinking. And so when I came into New Thought, I thought, well, I'm going to start changing my thinking and I'm going to open up to different possibilities. And I could conceive of, like 500,000, 1 million, 2 million. And then I realized that whatever that number is, that's a limitation in some way. And so I started exploring this idea that as we tap into our infinite beingness, our true nature, and not only understand conceptually that we're each an expression of the one power and one presence, but to actually live that is to step into a world that is beyond duality of good and bad and right and wrong, and therefore infinite potentiality, infinite possibilities. And the greatest paradox that has happened for me in my life is as I tap into that, I unplug from thinking the world needs to change in order for me to be happy. And what could be greater than the freedom of recognizing that the conditions of the world don't create the conditions of my life? That's profound. And that was an intellectual understanding or a concept for me that I played with for many years. And then I had an experience, and many of us have had this experience, where we touch reality and we move beyond the duality that the mind creates. We might call it the peak experience, the aha moment. Maybe it's in meditation when we really feel into the frequency of the possibilities of life, when we recognize that the entire structure that we've been given is only alive in relative reality, that the ideas we've been taught are limitations that have been given to us. And we feel into that frequency and recognize, oh my gosh, it's all simply perfect the way it is. I don't need anything in the world to change in order to be happy. I tap into the truth of who and what I am, and then I bring that into the world. I've had those peak experiences. And for me, my ego immediately stepped in and said, I want more of that. I want to feel that way all the time. I had a person in my life once ask me, do you really walk around all the time seeing only love and kindness and openness, knowing there's only one, knowing that it's all God? And my response is, yes, I do walk around that way all the time, but I don't always remember it. And so sometimes we have these peak experiences that we might then understand the nature of reality and the nature of illusion. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is when we tap into and recognize that the truth of who and what we are is infinite potential, and everything that we've been taught as reality is really just a construct, as Don Miguel Ruiz calls it, the domestication of the human. We've been domesticated to believe that we must act a certain way because of our age or our gender or our race or our orientation. Where in the world we are from, our culture, we become programmed to believe that in some way we're limited and we must act this way and not that way. And if we watch the news, we hear all kinds of stories about what's happening in the world. And then if we turn the channel, I don't know if we still turn channels, but back in the day, we would actually turn the channel, then we hear the same story from a totally different point of view. And we might ask ourselves, well, what's true here? What's reality? I'm hearing this story on this channel about what's happening in the world, and I turn to that channel and I'm hearing something completely different. And maybe our mind goes into a story, well, one must be true and one must be untrue. You know, we have been given a narrative that we live in a polarized culture, or at least in the United States, we've been saying that we're polarized. And I woke up one day and realized I don't think we're actually polarized. I think it's that we've been conditioned to have polarized thinking. I have been conditioned, and maybe you've been conditioned if you've come to planet Earth, to believe in the concepts of good and bad and right and wrong. And then we defend our position, right? And that's conflict. Conflict at its root is I have the answer and therefore you don't. Or maybe even you have the answer and therefore I don't. And that is what we call relative reality in New Thought. We're not denying that something's happening in the world. And if you're anything like me, that was maybe a stage of your development. I went through a period of time in New Thought where I really turned away from the conditions of the world, like, oh, this isn't real, this isn't happening. And I would deny what was happening in the world. And I was also denying what was happening within me, especially on an emotional level. And then I realized that, sometimes the most simple teachings are the most profound. And Jesus, the Christ, meaning Jesus who came and attained, or at least we are told attained, this consciousness, this level of a consciousness that we might call enlightenment, told us something very, very profound, that the intention is to be in the world, but not of the world. And when I heard that, at a very deep level, I recognized that the intention of life isn't to change the world. And I spent my entire 20s trying to change the world. And if I could just get the world to be a certain way, then I could be happy. And then I went through this period of time where I realized maybe it's not about that. Maybe it's about denying what's happening in the world. And I went into that's not happening. I'm not having this emotion. This experience isn't real. And then I realized that teaching is so profound, and it's so profound in its simplicity. Can I be in the world? In other words, I don't need to deny what's happening in the world, but I'm not of the world. So if I'm not of the world in this case, we're talking about the world of cause and effect and condition, polarization, opinionating, us and them, and good and bad, and right and wrong. When we're in that structure, in many religions, political systems, a lot of it lives in that. I have the answer. And what I discovered is the paradigm of possibilities is moving beyond looking for an answer. And my mind honestly struggled with that. What do you mean I'm not supposed to have the answers? Isn't that what this is all about? Figuring out what the answers are? And maybe you came to spiritual community like I did, seeking those answers, wanting so desperately for someone to tell me how to live. And then I discovered that true spirituality, or true awareness, is really not about the answers, but about being in the question. And the questions open us up to these different possibilities. So living in the paradigm of possibilities is almost an oxymoron, because a paradigm is a way of seeing, and possibilities are moving beyond that. So my intention today is to recognize that I can unplug from the conditions of the world and plug into the truth of who and what I am, the truth of who and what each of us are, this perfect expression of the one power and the one presence. So that might sound really great. What's the practical application of this, right? Because some of us have been told that the practical application of New Thought is to have more prosperity, better relationships, better health. To me, that's actually the byproduct, or almost the side effect, of spiritual practice. But for many years, I thought that was the intention, right? So I was looking for the right way to do it so I could manifest the perfect life so that I could be happy. And then I discovered this different way of being, which was recognizing that everything I've ever been seeking was already within me, that I came into this world as a whole and perfect spiritual being, absolutely deeply connected with the infinite potentiality of right now. And that as spiritual beings, we are infinite. And as human beings, we get programmed to believe that that's not true. So in spiritual practice, we can reach a place where we call off the search and rest in this great reality. So the practical application then becomes touching reality, touching our true nature, cultivating relationship with our true nature, our essential self, and then unlearning just about everything we've ever believed to be true. And at first, that was very disorienting for me. And now it's the key to freedom. Question every idea I've ever had. Question every point of view. Where did I get this idea? What does it create when? That's my new favorite thing for the last year or so. Simply asking myself, what gets created when I fill in the blank? What gets created when I believe this? What gets created when I hold a point of view that I have the answer? What gets created when I believe that I have this political point of view that is right and someone else's is wrong? And so people will say to me, are you saying I shouldn't have opinions? And my question is, how free do you want to be? So yes, the mind, going back to the mind, my mind is always opinionating. Learning how to cultivate a loving relationship with that part of me allows me to have a relationship with that part of you. And as I realize I'm not my thoughts and I'm not my opinions, I'm something so much more than that, that reality is actually beyond the duality that the mind creates, then I touch reality and I have that place of compassion for you. And for a moment, can we imagine that each of us pause and commit to our own inner transformation, our own recognition of our true nature, and we move beyond opinionating at each other, toward each other, or to ourselves, and become curious. I remember at one point I was in Palm Springs and I called a Lyft, and I was going to the airport. It was a very short ride. It was maybe about a 6-minute ride or 7-minute ride to the airport. And this young woman showed up with so much enthusiasm about a particular political figure. She had the bumper stickers, the balloons, the banners, the hat. She had all of it. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm really curious about this. And my dedication, my intention for our time together, this 6-minute relationship I was going to have with this spiritual being, was to be really curious about why she had such enthusiasm for this particular political figure. And my intention and my commitment to myself was not to offer my opinion, but to really hear her, to really hold a space to really hear her. And something really powerful happened for me. And that is, at the end of those 7 minutes, to be clear, I didn't change my mind about this particular person she was supporting. But what I did experience was compassion and understanding for how she got there. And imagining a world where, rather than projecting onto someone else that they shouldn't be doing this or shouldn't be doing that, we allow ourselves to move within and really ask the question, what gets created when I hold this point of view? Imagine what would happen to the seeming polarization in our culture and in our communities on social media. And so we're living in remarkable times, there's no doubt. We're living in a time when we have more access to information than we ever have. And my guess is that's going to continue, that we're going to have more information at our fingertips. And because of that, we're going to have the possibility of sharing opinions in different ways. And we're going to have things come to us as fact, and maybe some of us aren't going to question them. And so this paradigm of possibilities is to recognize a couple of things. One, start with anchoring in my true nature. Start with that profound teaching that we are here to be in the world, but not of the world. And as we dedicate ourselves to that, then we can start being in the world with openness and curiosity. My new trick that I'm telling myself, my new acronym is I'm studying to be a cop. Curious, open, and present. And so if I notice something, a news story, which I don't watch anymore, that's a whole story I would be happy to share. I have unplugged from the media, mainstream media, for way over a year. And I will tell you that I've never felt better. People have said to me, well, aren't you burying your head in the sand? I'm not really interested in the paradigm of division and the paradigm of fear. I'm interested in the paradigm of possibility. So for now, I'm unplugging. And so when I anchor in that, then I can become curious, open, and present about everything I'm hearing and everything I'm experiencing. I can begin to ask myself, I wonder what the request for love here is. We often hear that everything is love or fear. And as I shifted that to everything is love or a request for love, whether that request be conscious or unconscious, I became curious about how I can look beyond someone's opinions or someone's point of view, someone's perspective or their action, and ask, at the core of this person, what is the request? And what I have discovered is what many of us have discovered, and that is the request is almost always a request for love and connection. So we came into this world as whole and perfect spiritual beings, deeply connected with our true nature. And for whatever reason, whether we've chosen to be here at this time or whether we are assigned planet Earth at this time, we came into a world that teaches us about lack and limitation and otherness. And we see it all around us now. And we're in a profound opportunity. There's a profound opportunity right now in this moment, not for us to look for like-minded people, but to look for people who are dedicated to understanding at a deep level that we are much more than the seeming division, that we are shifting. We talked about, I think this the last time I spoke here, we talked about shifting from the law of attraction to the law of radiance. Who have I come here to be? Can I be the light in the midst of a situation in the world that might appear to be dark? And what does it take for me to be able to do that? And for me, spiritual community is an important component of that, not because we come together to have the answer, but because we come together to dedicate ourselves to reconnecting, which of course we're not ever disconnected, but to have the great remembering of our true nature, and then dedicate ourselves to unlearning all the stuff that we've put on top of that, right? Rumi gave us that teaching many, many years ago. We're not here to seek for love, but to look at the barriers we put that prevent us from experiencing that. And so as we move deeply into the 21st century, where it seems like there is so much division all around us, we can, with just a shift in perspective, we can say, what is being called here? What is wanting to emerge here? How can I be part of the emerging new paradigm of oneness? Not denying what's happening in the world, not being at war with. Mother Teresa gave us that how many years ago? I'm not going to participate in an anti-war demonstration, but I will march for peace. And so in closing, what I want to offer is something profoundly simple. Who have you come here to be? What paradigm are you interested in reporting from? What gets created when you recognize the truth of who and what you are that's beyond any idea of lack and limitation? What happens when we collectively, as a New Thought community, come together and say, no, we're not going to participate in the collective consciousness that would have us looking at fear and division and separation, lack, not good enough, and move into this recognition that we are infinite beings and that we are here to radiate that into the world. And the shift is happening in a profound way. In my own journey, there was a point when I had to really embrace the shadow. And what that looked like was very simple. All of the ideas, the beliefs, the biases, the unconscious understanding of the world needed to emerge for the healing. And what it looked like at some point was me on the floor in the fetal position sobbing. And so collectively, if it's true that we're all one, if it's true that we're all part of particles of the one, then right now, everything that's emerging in our culture is emerging so that it can heal. And we can resist that. We can fight against it. We can stand for the highest possibility that right now what's happening is this incredible evolution in consciousness, and that each of us is being called right now to be that in the world, to be that difference, to be that light. And what I like to say is life is a great experiment. So my invitation is for each of us to experiment with what it means to understand our true nature and to radiate that true nature out into the world and see what happens. So incredibly grateful. Peace and blessings. Love you all. So honored that I got to speak with you. And I love this moment and I'm so grateful.
And so just continuing with that beautiful theme of the light within and just allowing your eyes to close if that feels comfortable for you today. as we just take these few moments to go within, to connect ourselves to that beautiful divine light that is present within us all. That place within ourselves that is untouched by outside circumstances, by history, by current events, that place within ourselves that is eternal and always calling us to be our greatest yet to be. And so in this moment, we make the choice together, as we have come together today, to go within, to seek, to come in contact with that place of God within us, that place of God that connects us all to each other. And during our meditation time today, you can use some aspect of your breath, the length of your inhales, the length of your exhales, the sensation that the air you feel as the air leaves your nostrils, some aspect of your breath. You can use that to bring you back to the present moment, to bring you back to that God light within. You can also use, instead of your breath, the quality of God, a quality of the Spirit, like love or peace, grace or joy. And you just say that word silently to yourself and allow that word, that quality of God, to bring you back to that divine space within. And we just do this as many times as we need to, as many times as we become aware that we may be in the future or in the past, or involved in a story or thought. We just lovingly guide ourselves back to the divine source of grace within. So we just take a few moments in the stillness to connect. In this moment, we just allow ourselves to be exactly as we are. That there is no other place or other way we need to be, that we can just be here and be now, and be in this divine love together. With every breath, we feel ourselves closer and closer to that inward light, that divine source of peace within. Every breath, we just feel the expansion of our hearts and the connection to one another, that eternal connection. So as we begin to close out our meditation, this afternoon we just give thanks for this community and for this practice and for being with one another. Take a full breath in together and easily exhale out. And then as you're ready, you can allow your eyes to open, just bringing your vision and your open heart and that inward light back into the space.